Hello and welcome to another episode of the UCLA Bruins Insider Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Con Moreno, lead writer for UCLA Bruins on SI. And today we're going to go ahead and talk about UCLA's pretty devastating Week 2 loss to UNLV. We're going to talk about just some observations I had from it, a couple of stories that I wrote about it, and kind of what this game means to the Bruins moving forward. It was a crucial game, I think, for UCLA. And it's really, the loss is really going to have an impact on their season and changes what we thought, or at least what I thought about how UCLA was going to shape out in 2025. I will preface and say that it's really not looking great now moving forward. But without further ado, let's just move on to kind of a recap of the game, takeaways, and everything that I saw. So obviously the loss wasn't as bad score-wise as the 43-10 loss to Utah that UCLA had just a week prior. But, I mean, I do think that the result kind of stings UCLA and its fans a little bit more just because of how close they actually got. I mean, UCLA looked about as good as people thought they would have been in the second half, but in the first half was absolutely brutal. I mean, they kind of carried their week 1, I guess, status into the first half against UNLV. Just defense was on pace to have, another one of those games where tackling was an issue. UCLA dropped 23-0 before they kicked a field goal to close the half. So, going into halftime, it was 23-3. It was kind of looking similar to the Utah game. But then the second half came along, and UCLA's offense just kind of unleashed and unlocked, and Nico Iamaleava looked really, really good going into that second half. But, I mean, what really, and it's one of the 3 takeaways that I have, what really held UCLA back was kind of their discipline the entire game. I mean, they had a ton of penalties. Overall, it was just, it's like week 1, it was tackling, and week 2, it was discipline. So just a ton of, small little things. I really do think that in the second half, they executed well. And, Deshaun Foster, after the Utah game, was saying that execution was something that they really needed to work on. The first half, they were not executing well at all, but the second half, you really saw the potential of this UCLA team when they're able to execute like they do. So, let's get into the 3 takeaways that I had, and I already prefaced it. The first one, obviously, is, first it was tackling, now it was discipline. I mean, don't get me wrong, UCLA's defense was on verge of putting up another performance tackling wise like they did in the first half, but they did clear it up in the second. I'll give them that. I mean, on some crucial drives in the second half when UNLV had the ball, it was like some times where you thought, I don't know, I think the Rebels are going to be able to, get out of this one, and UCLA is just going to show up like the defense we saw them in week 1. But I mean, we were wrong. UCLA came up with some really clutch stops towards the end of the game, and ultimately it wasn't even the defense that lost them the game. You could argue that, they gave up 23 points in the first quarter, but I mean, offense left a lot to be desired in the first half. Second half, not so much, and we'll get to that. But ultimately, in the last drive, it was the offense's fault that UCLA couldn't at least tie the game. But, much like tackling was that one glaring issue against Utah that, you talked about all week, I think it's going to be discipline. The Bruins were called for 14 penalties, and it cost them 129 yards. Not only is the number brutal, but, the way in which they came, in the timing they came, it felt like they came on every single play where UCLA was starting to get momentum. I mean, there's one where, you get an 18-yard pass, and then, oh no, it's being called back because of a 15-yard penalty. Or, Jalen Berger finally gets off to a 20-yard run. Actually, no, it's holding. Let's bring that back and, give them another 15 yards at that. there was a goal line stand. I think it was the third quarter, either the third or the fourth quarter, where Iamaleava on third down found Mikey Matthews in it for a touchdown, but it was called back because Titus Mokiao Atimalala was called for a pass interference and was basically wasn't finishing his route, but he was pushing the defender who was trying to catch up to Mikey Matthews. And so they ended up having to settle for a field goal on that. It was just those little things, all these self-inflicting wounds that really bit UCLA for the entire game. And honestly, they kind of addressed it in the second half, but there were still some pretty glaring penalties in the second half that really costed them from unleashing a full comeback. And that kind of leads us into the second takeaway, and even Deshaun Foster said it. It was a tale of two halves. I mean, the first half looked absolutely brutal. It looked like the UCLA team that we saw in week one. But the second half, they looked a lot more like that well-oiled machine that we thought, especially offensively. Offensively, they looked dynamic. Nico was getting comfortable. He was finding his receivers, going through his check downs and going through his reads, finding his check downs. He looked really good. I thought he looked really comfortable, especially in the second half. I do think that he had a much better game this week than he did last week. I'll read what Deshaun Foster said in his opening statement. He said it was a tale of two halves. The first half didn't really show up how we wanted to. Second half, we were able to make some plays, but we were still doing some things that we shouldn't have done, stopping drives, getting in our own way. It's something that we can fix, and we've got a short week this week, so we have to get in there and be ready to go. We're going to get it fixed. A short week this week because they play New Mexico on Friday. Yeah, it is at the Rose Bowl against New Mexico. That should be a win, hopefully. I don't know. New Mexico has kind of looked a little bit decent this season. And just as I do with every observation, I try and pull a positive, and I've talked about it all day. The offense was a really good positive in that second half. The offense was rolling. Iamaleava had an infinitely better game than he had last week, and the Bruins showed just how dynamic they can be offensively before Iamaleava threw an interception. That last drive, I mean, if they would have converted on that last drive, it would have been the biggest story because Iamaleava was just finding his receivers on every single play. Quasi Gilmer had two astounding catches to keep the drives alive. It was really good, but I mean, it's all about starting faster for UCLA moving forward. Like, if they can carry this second half momentum into the first half of New Mexico, I have no doubt that they'll beat New Mexico by a number of scores. But, I mean, everything just has to work out. There can't just be one glaring issue like they've had the last few games, the last two games, I should say. Everything needs to work out, and they just need to start better. And that's really what I think the biggest takeaway is that they need to start better. Because if they played at least 75% in the first half like they did in the second half, I think UCLA could have came out with a win. And I said I was going to talk about it, but if we look at the outlook now, I definitely did not predict an 0-2 start. I know some people did, but this 0-2 start becomes really important because I think, according to ESPN at least, UCLA is only favored in one more game moving forward, and that's against New Mexico. All the other games, UCLA is not favored against their opponents, which is very, very upsetting because that means that they would go winless in conference play. So, yeah, moving forward, it's really important for UCLA to kind of fix up their errors and get back to, or not even get back, but get to that second half version of them that we saw on a more consistent basis. So, yeah, that's all I had for the takeaways. Tomorrow we'll come back at you with probably just some insight like we did last week onto how UCLA's opponents did and where they rank in the top 25. So, yeah, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to UCLA Bruins Insider Podcast. We'll see you tomorrow.